Let's get the time on them. What's the time?
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock. All right then. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome to Sovereign Hill. My name's Paul. I'm one of the troopers here. Now, the uniform I'm wearing, the uniform of the Mounted Goldfields Trooper. Mounted meaning us mounted troopers, we generally be mounted on the back of a horse, right about this place, trying the very best to maintain a bit of law and order around here. Now, us Mounted Goldfields Troopers, well, we weren't around for a particularly long period of time, only for a few short years, unfortunately, but I do think it's fairly safe to say we may have caused a wee bit of mischief here on the Goldfields in our time here. Now, for those of you who aren't from around these parts, you're from Ballarat? No? I suppose then I better give you a bit of a brief background history about this place where we all find ourselves, Ballarat. So I'll start with the name of the place, Ballarat, or Ballarat as it was once known. So Ballarat, it's actually two words. The language of the local Aboriginal people, this area, the Wathaurong people. And in their language, Ballarat, that means elbow place, which translates into resting place for many, many tens of thousands of years. The Wathaurong people lived all around here. This is the traditional lands we're all standing on right now. Land which provided those folk with everything they needed to survive all throughout all the years, such as food and shelter and clothing, etc. Things will start to change around here in the late 1830s. With the arrival of Europeans here and others, of course, there were a couple of Scotsmen, like myself, a couple of Scottish squatters called the Yule brothers, come up this way here. They're just looking for a place to raise some sheep, so this all became a sheep run around here for quite a number of years. That's right up until just after late August of 1851. That's when things really start to change a huge amount around here, because gold was discovered here. Now, the first bit of gold discovered around here was actually up the next wee township up to the south was here, a place called Bunningyong in the creek there. That same month, August 1851, gold was discovered just over there, not far at all from where we're standing, a place they called Poverty Point. Now that was either some kind of joke considering the huge amount of gold up here, or perhaps it was an attempt to try to put off any more people coming here. Who'd go looking for gold in a place called Poverty Point? Not me. Anyway, if that was the case, unfortunately that wee ploy didn't work out very well. And as soon as word got out to the population centres such as Melbourne Town, Port of Geelong, Sydney, in fact the rest of the world, about the discovery of a fairly substantial amount of gold lying about up here, well, a thing called a gold rush happened here. Not just any wee gold rush, one of the biggest and richest gold rushes the world has ever seen to this day. And what's a gold rush? Well, that's when thousands upon thousands and thousands of people from all walks of life just dropped everything they're doing and rushed up here to the Ballarat in great haste to come and find their fortune. Now, I'm talking about people from all walks of life, I really do mean that. It was everyone from your fancy gentlemen with their top hats on, come up to have a crack at the gold finding, doctors, lawyers, all the tradesmen you can imagine, farm labourers, people even arriving here by boat in Victoria, whatever plans they had on arrival, these people, many of them as soon as they heard of this gold rush taking place, just abandoned those plans and joined in with this gold rush. Now, I'm quite sad to say, I also have to include my fellow police among that number. Now, there were 40 police officers stationed in Melbourne Town just before the gold rush started. After the gold rush started, there remained 2 police in Melbourne Town. The rest of them deserted their posts and joined in with this gold rush. Now, with all these thousands of people descending on this wee place, remember, there's nothing here at all. No infrastructure whatsoever, barely even a road to the place. It's just a scattering of a few farm buildings about the place. So it's absolute chaos here right at the beginning of this gold rush. And like you see down behind you, this part of the museum down here actually represents that early part of the gold rush. When the first wave of people rushed here, everybody's living in tents. Alright, so it's absolute chaos here. Now there's a bit of crime here, right from the start. The sorts of crimes I'm talking about, all your kind of common crimes, like assault and theft, but all the way right through to murder was happening. Some bad things get on here. Now, there were some police here at the beginning of the gold rush. They were called the Native Police Corps. There were some mounted Aboriginal troopers, but to be fair to those fellows, they were mostly kept busy escorting shipments of gold to Melbourne Town by this point. It soon became very obvious to the authorities they were going to have to bolster the police force here. So that's when they started to recruit us Mounted Goldfields Troopers. Now, to become a Mounted Goldfields Trooper, you didn't really have to have very many formal qualifications as such, Sally, but if you were literate, if you could read and write, it's a good thing. You'd be more likely to become a mounted trooper like myself. Now let's talk about pay. Yes, pay. Now we're offered 22 shiny pounds a year to come here and do this job, which may I say right now is a measly sum of money. In fact, I think a shepherd probably gets paid more than that to look after a flock of sheep. But nonetheless, so many of us did take up offer to come and do this work. Now, lots of us mounted Goldfields troopers were recruited in a place called Van Diemen's Land, which is now known as Tasmania. Not necessarily from among all the criminal element down there. Lots of people think all us troopers are all criminals, convicts and the like. In fact, I mean, I'm sure a few must have slipped through the net. But there were actually lots of pensioned off British military men living out their days on their pension down there in Van Diemen's Land. And many of those fellas took up the offer here to become mounted troopers. So you're talking about ex-British cavalrymen and like certainly knew how to ride a horse well and handle a sabre. Pretty useful skills if you want to be a mounted trooper. Now let me put into some kind of a perspective for you, let's say what I'm not prepared to do, or my fellow troopers, for £22 a year. Well, I'm certainly not going to be risking my neck for that sort of money. No chance. You're not going to see me try and write down and apprehend some crazed murderer person. No way, not for £22 a year, you're joking. I'm far more likely to turn my horse around and trot off in the opposite direction. And essentially that's what's happening here. Yes, you had this brand new shiny police force here in place, but none of us are really interested in doing any of that police work stuff, not for £22 a year. And in any case as well, the diggers had this system among them called digger justice. The diggers would actually dish out digger justice as and when required. For example, they absolutely hated thieves among them, so they would dish out punishments such as a flogging or even banishment from the goldfields in some extreme cases. But nonetheless though, people here are starting to grumble a wee bit, you could say, the miners, the gold miners. Particularly these miners have paid for this gold licence. But with that gold licence in hand, the miners at least expect some protection here from the government. They expect at least some law and order about the place. So the government has to come up with something, and come up with something pretty quick. If you like, some sort of an incentive to try to encourage us troopers to do our jobs a wee bit more enthusiastically. You could say, well, they come up with, I personally think it was absolute genius myself, but they said that the arresting officer, we could keep half of any fines that we collected by means of a small incentive. Now, getting better now, this story, isn't it? Let me just quickly go through a couple of common finable offences from the very early part of the gold rush. I'll start off with this here. This is what's known as a gold licence, and I hope all of you that require one have got a valid one on your person, because I'll be checking later on. Let me explain quickly how this works. Now, if you're a good law-abiding citizen, you want to come here to the Ballarat and dig for gold, the first thing you should do is come and pay a visit to the Gold Commissioner here. He's the Crown representative here. Buy yourself one of these gold licences. Now, it'll cost you £2, and it'll last you for 3 months. And what this gold licence entitles you to is to legally go out there on the dig and stake out your claim and legally start digging for gold. Now, if you're down there on the diggings, you're a male, you're over the age of 11, and you don't have a valid gold licence on your person at all times when challenged by a trooper, you're in a wee bit of trouble. That'll be a £5 fine for you. Half that £5 fine goes in my pocket. Thank you very much. And the other half goes to the Queen. Now, an example of another common final offence here in the early part of the gold rush was for something called sly grog. Now, looking around me, I think some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, sly grog. For those of you who don't, children, sly grog's terrible stuff. Illegal alcohol. Now, alcohol was strictly forbidden here in the early part of the gold rush. It's dry here. But I'm sure you can appreciate with all these thousands upon thousands and thousands of freezing cold, hard-working, thirsty diggers. Of course, a huge sly grog industry sprung up here. But when I say a huge sly grog industry, in fact, I mean an industrial scale sly grog industry sprung up here. They're shipping on all sorts of spirits, brandies, gins, whiskies, even distilling rough white spirits here, such as Pasheen, kind of moonshine sort of an idea. But some of the ingredients the sly grogs are adding into the sly grog would make your hair stand on end. Some of them are adding gunpowder and Turkish opium into the sly grog, selling that to diggers. Anyway, I don't care what they drink, all I care about is one thing: money. Now, the fine for selling, producing or possessing sly grog, £50. £50, yes. Now, so what does this all mean to us troopers and us doing our work here? Well, for a start, half that £50 fine, that's more than my entire year's wages just from that one arrest. So all of a sudden now, us troopers, we're doing our job very enthusiastically indeed here. Some may say a little too enthusiastically. We're organising these huge big licence hunts, rounding up all the gold miners, checking all their gold licences, issuing fines to all those who don't have a valid licence, and our pockets are starting to fill up with cash. We're taking out the sly groggers, taking them down, taking some of their operations under our own control. That's a different story, that one. Right, so we're riding around the place. I'm sure you'll get the picture. Us troopers, we're riding around the place, pockets stuffed full of cash, massive big grins on our faces, and the diggers are all just looking on and going, what's going on here? And they're just getting angrier and angrier and angrier about the entire situation unfolding around them. Now, what did the diggers do in response? To cut a very long story short, because I can babble on like this for hours. The diggers eventually had it up to here, alright? They decided to have these monster protest meetings up over in Bakery Hill, 10,000 diggers strong. It's a third of the population here at the time. At these monster meetings, apart from jumping up and down and screaming and yelling and stamping their feet, diggers are actually taking out their gold licenses, official government documentation, I might add, out very dearly, and they're throwing them in the fire, they're burning their gold licenses and acting the fires. By this point, the diggers don't care about any consequences anymore. All the diggers here are armed to the teeth with guns of some description. They're starting to form themselves up into military-style units, and they're openly marching and drilling around the place. All right, but probably the worst thing the diggers did, in the eyes of the law, they made themselves a flag of their own design. They hoisted that flag up, Southern Cross flag, hoisted that flag way up high. They all stood and swore a solemn oath of allegiance to that flag and to each other, which is lovely. But there's only one problem: you can't do that here. This is a British colony. The only flag you can swear allegiance to is that one flying up there. If you're swearing allegiance to some foreign or just made up flags, that's called high treason. So from that act alone, the diggers open rebellion against the Crown. They gave them no option. They nip it in the bud before it even really got started. So what happened was the diggers decided, if you like, to challenge the government to a bit of a fight. They built themselves a stockade, they called it, over on the Eureka Lead, just over there. And if you get a chance later on today, take a walk up the hill, look over in that direction, you'll see a big flag.
What was that?
A flag flying on it, that's where it took place, the Battle of the Eureka Stockade. Now, the government obliged the diggers. They sent in the Redcoat soldiers and surprise attacked them at their stockade. Now, it was before dawn on a Sunday morning. That's a surprise attack for you, I suppose. The 3rd of December 1854. The whole skirmish or action ensued lasted between 15 to 20 minutes. By the end of that 15 to 20 minutes, at least 22 of the diggers lay slain on the ground. The rest of them fled for their lives, and the ringleaders were all quickly rounded up, taken straight down to Melbournetown, stand trial on charges of high treason. Now, believe it or not, I still can't quite believe it myself to this day, every single one of those diggers on trial, all 13 of them, walked free from court. They were all found not guilty by a jury of their peers. Now, in the aftermath of the battle and the rebellion, there was a big inquiry into the whole thing, and all the thing the diggers were fighting for ended up being granted to them almost within the year. So they lost the battle, they won the war. The gold licence, that was quickly abolished after Eureka and replaced with a miner's rights, which is a lot more reasonably priced. When the diggers held that miner's rights, it gave them the right to buy a wee parcel of land to grow some food on, something they were fighting hard for. Also, when they held that miner's rights, it gave them the right to vote, representation, another thing they were fighting hard for. Shortly after Eureka, that was it for us Mounted Goldfields troopers. That was it. We were disbanded, and our paramilitary style of policing was quickly replaced by a more civil policing model, similar to the few policing models taken off in London and England at the time. And we all lived happily ever after, I think. So I would like to say all the things we enjoy now take for granted, thanks to the sacrifice of the 22 diggers of Eureka. Now, well done, children, for sticking with me through the big history part. It's all fun from now on. Let me tell you a little bit about some of the tools of the trade, or accoutrements I have hanging off of my person here. I'm going to start off with this piece here. This is a standard police issue pistol, 58 caliber muzzle loading weapon. Means you pour all the black powder and musket ball down the muzzle end of the gun there. 58 caliber refers to the size of the hole at the end of the thing, which is quite a lot of calibers for a pistol, 58 calibers. Now, they reckon this thing has a range of up to 30 yards. All I can say is good luck to you hitting a target at 30 yards with this thing. Step down from there, everybody, please. I'm going to be pointing a gun in that direction. You're okay there. Let's pretend that tree there is a digger. I'm just going to explain to you why this thing's so inaccurate, right? Let's pretend that tree there's a digger. I'm taking very careful aim at him. Right, digger, put your hands up or I'll shoot. The best thing that digger could do is just stand there like that and let me have a shot at him from here. I'll probably miss him with this thing. Now, the reason why it is so inaccurate, fires out of it a wee round lead musket ball, just like this one here. Now, it'd be lovely if they were, but not every single one of these wee round lead musket balls is always the same size. See if it happens to be a wee bit too small, as often they are, believe it or not. When you fire the thing, it can take a bit of a wobble on its way down the barrel. When it flies out the end of the muzzle there, it can pretty much fly off in whichever direction. That digger there, he also has about 30 to 40 seconds to bolt to make a run for it, while I furiously try to reload this thing to have another shot at it. The best thing I can do with this thing is throw it at him like one of them boomerang things like that. I hope it doesn't come back like a boomerang because it's a piece of junk and I hate it. Or if I'm actually riding down, get close enough, bat him off the back of the head with it. Now the same times we're riding around with this type of weapon on our person, there's all these diggers arriving here all the time from a place called California in the USA. There's loads of California 49ers. So they've all been digging for gold over on the California goldfields for a good couple of years by this point. But they had a great riches to be found here on the Ballarat. They're all arriving here all the time from California. What are they bringing with them from California? Boxes of these things. 6-shooter revolvers. So the diggers are all walking around sporting these fancy 6-shooter revolvers. They've got 6 shots, one straight after the other. We've got one shot and in 30 to 40 seconds reload to have a second shot. So you could kind of say we were slightly outgunned here by the diggers. And we're never actually issued with weapons like these, but we could buy them and carry them for our own protection, or we could obtain them by whichever means and confiscate them off them. That's what I got that. Certainly feel a lot safer riding around with a 6-shooter on my belt there than that other thing there. Here's something else to carry around me.
Wow.
Type of sword called a sabre. Now the sabre just has the one cutting edge along here, the back of it's flat. Like I said at the beginning of the demonstration, we're a mounted trooper. This is an example of a cavalry weapon designed to be used off the back of a horse. Using particularly this sharp part on the end here called a foible and a downward slashing motion. So if you can imagine on my trusty steed riding along, pull out my sabre and just like that's how you do it. Alright? Got a hand guard here to protect your hand in case you get involved in like a wee sword fight situation. Part of the bomb's called the pommel. You round somebody down, give them a wee knock in the head with the pommel, make their day. The grip of the handle's made out of shark skin.
Shark skin.
Shark's probably stingray skin, but shark skin sounds a bit more impressive. Comes out as a very grippy and durable material, so if I'm to get wet in the rain or covered in blood, you're not going to lose grip of your sabre. Now, this isn't a weapon though I would choose to use in anger very often at all. It's a really dangerous weapon, it does some amount of damage. And believe it or not, us troopers, we're actually really nice. We don't actually want to injure or maim the diggers at all. Heaven forbid, kill them. You see, the idea being, we want the diggers to keep busy digging for gold. And you can't dig for gold very good if a big trooper took one of your arms off with a sabre. Alright, so we don't really use that very often. The idea being we want the diggers to keep busy digging for gold so they've got loads of money. So we can then issue fines to them for whatever reason to pick up and extort money from them. Right, so the diggers, if you like, they're like a piggy bank to us troopers here. And we just love it. And I'm afraid that's just the way the world goes round here, whether you like it or not.